All right. Well, welcome to the fiscal year 2025 Community Festivals Grant webinar. My name is Hillary Amna. I use the pronoun she, they, and I'm the grants program lead for civic arts at the City of Berkeley. And this presentation is being recorded, so it will be available to you on our website later this month. All right, and before we begin, I will do a land acknowledgement. The City of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live in was built on the territory of the Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This was and continues to be of great importance to all of the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Verona Band. As we begin our webinar, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shell Mound, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the City of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the City of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. The City of Berkeley will continue to build relationships with the Lejeune tribe and to create meaningful actions that uphold the intention of this land acknowledgement. Okay, and I will take us quickly through today's presentation agenda. First, I'll give you a civic arts overview in case you are new to the work of civic arts. We'll go through some important dates of the grant cycle, talk about this specific grant program's details, including eligibility and the program requirements. Then I'll take you through the application process. We'll talk about what's included in your application and then a submittable tutorial. We'll talk about the review process, go through the review criteria and scoring scale, and talk about some grant writing tips, ways you can access technical assistance, and then I'll answer any questions that you have at the end of the presentation. And if you think of questions as we go through our slides, you can enter your questions in the Q&A box using that symbol that should be at the bottom of your Zoom bar. I do ask that you keep your questions general. If you have very specific questions to your particular festival that you want to propose, you can contact me individually and I'm happy to answer those questions for you. But for the purposes of this presentation, we're looking for more questions that would maybe apply to anyone. Okay. So our mission is to support a culturally vibrant and diverse arts ecosystem within the City of Berkeley, and we do that in several ways. The grants program, which is funding for artists, nonprofit organizations, and festivals, is one of the ways that we fulfill this mission. We also have a robust public art program, and we create access to arts and cultural experiences for both residents and visitors. And we've recently added a new program to our offerings, which is the Berkeley Poet Laureate program. And that just had its inaugural run last year. Okay, on the right side of this slide, you'll see our cultural equity statement. But I did want to highlight some specific ways our grants program is committing to making the program more equitable. So last grant cycle, we increased the cultural equity review criterion and refined the language for that criterion. And that continues to be included in our current grant program. So hopefully we will be able to see some impact, or what the impact is from that in our coming grant cycles. We are also started offering translation services for both the guidelines and the application. And if you submit your application in a language other than English, we would be able to translate that into English for our panelists. Our guidelines have been reviewed by the city's Disability Services Program. We've recruited a larger review panelist pool, and we continue to prioritize Black, Indigenous, and people of color as grant review panelists. And we've done some targeted outreach for our particular programs, and we're offering a new grant category this year that we're hoping increases our commitment to equity, the arts programs grant. And with that grant, we're hoping to reach new communities, new audiences, new organizations that we haven't been interacting with in the past. For our important dates, the grant applications are now open, and the deadline to apply is March 6th at 11:59 p.m. But even though there is a 11:59 p.m. deadline, please remember that staff are not available after 4:30 p.m. The grant review panelists will score applications March through April, and then we will schedule a virtual grant panel review meeting in May. And all applicants will be notified about the day of the public grant review panel meeting, so you can attend if you'd like. Our grants subcommittee will meet on June 6th to discuss funding scenarios, and those funding scenarios are then brought to the Civic Arts Commission meeting that happens in June, and that's where the awards will be approved. But nothing is final until the City Council approves the budget for fiscal year 2025. And then in July, all applicants are notified about the results of the grant review panel with award or decline letters. Okay, so for this grant program, you can request up to $7,000 for festival-related expenses. I do want you to keep in mind that this funding category is intended for events that generally happen one time of year. It's not for ongoing programming or programming that happens, let's say, 6 months out of the year. This grant program aims to fund festivals that celebrate the cultural richness of Berkeley and have a meaningful, accessible engagement with the public. And for the purposes of this grant program, we defined a festival as a public event that celebrates a community, neighborhood, historically significant day, or shared cultural interest. And these can include arts fairs, celebrations of cultural heritage, or other similar events. To apply for this funding, you must be a nonprofit organization, and you can be a 501c3, 501c4, or 501c6 organization. Or if you have an organizational entity like a festival committee that is nonprofit in nature, but you don't have a federal tax exempt nonprofit status, you can use a fiscal sponsor to apply. But keep in mind that the fiscal sponsor must be a 501c3. So to recap, you can be a C3, C4, C6 organization to apply, or if you are using a fiscal sponsor because you are an organizational entity that is nonprofit in nature, you've got your own accounting system, more than one person involved with this entity, you can use a 501c3 organization to apply with a fiscal sponsor. Now, there is a new requirement for applicants that are using a fiscal sponsor this year. And this new requirement is being registered with the California Secretary of State as a nonprofit corporation. And I'll go into detail about this new requirement on a later slide. For this grant category, unlike our other grant categories, the applicant organization does not necessarily have to be based in Berkeley. However, the festival that you're proposing for this grant category must occur in Berkeley. And then a final thing to keep in mind about eligibility, your organizational entity has to be in good standing with Civic Arts. And for these purposes, mostly means that you don't have any outstanding reports from previous grants. Okay, for our program requirements, a portion of your festival must be free. You can include ticketed or fee-based elements of your festival, but there does need to be a free component. Some of it's got to be free. It's also needs to be open and accessible to the public. So you can't have your festival in any private buildings or spaces, or spaces that are not ADA accessible. And again, the festival does need to happen in Berkeley, and the funds that you are requesting from Civic Arts, those funds can only go toward expenses that are occurring in Berkeley. So let's say a small portion or a portion of your festival is happening outside of the Berkeley city limits. If you are awarded funds, all of the funds must go toward the Berkeley-based elements of your festival. Funded activities need to take place within the grant activity period, which is July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. And if you are awarded, you will be required to complete a final report that is due July 30th. And this is 30 days after the grant activity period ends. And keep in mind that grantees are responsible for securing their own permits, street closures, or permissions that they need to hold the event. We do have in our guidelines and on our website links to areas that might pertain to special event permits. So we can help direct you to the right folks to obtain those, but you will be required to obtain any permissions or permits on your own. Okay, all application materials for this grant need to be submitted electronically using our submittable grants management system. And, oh, I think there is a typo. Oh no, it's March 6th. March 6th is our deadline at 2024. Please excuse my last year's deadline. So March 6th is our deadline at 11:59 p.m. And again, but even though there is a midnight or 11:59, I won't say midnight, 11:59 p.m. Deadline, staff won't be available after regular business hours. For this grant, you can enable collaborators on submittable. So you can have multiple people working on the same submittable application. So I'll show you how you can enable collaborators in our tutorial. Please note that no extensions will be granted, so I really recommend applying early in case you run into any technical issues. And help with your application is available throughout the application period. The application includes some questions that will require you to enter text and some that will require you to upload files. And you'll need to upload your work samples, support materials. And if you're using a fiscal sponsor, you'll upload a letter of agreement between the applicant and the fiscal sponsor. And I do want to note that there are some requirements for that letter of agreement. It should not be more than 2 years old, and it should be signed by both the applicant and the fiscal sponsor. The narrative questions, staff qualifications, your boards of directors or festival committees, and your budget form will all require you to enter text directly into the application. And you'll also need the federal employer identification number, or EIN, of your organization or your fiscal sponsor's organization. And you'll enter this in your application to verify the nonprofit status. Again, there is a new requirement for fiscally sponsored organizations, and you'll need to upload your proof of registration with the California Secretary of State as a nonprofit corporation. So that's one new, and again, we'll talk about that in detail next. So if you are a fiscally sponsored organization applying for a festival grant, you'll need to register with the California Secretary of State, your organizational entity, as a California nonprofit. This is a new requirement, but it's easy to do. And so you don't need a federally tax exempt status to register as a California nonprofit corporation. So please keep that in mind. You can create a free account at the link here, and that link is also in our guidelines. So you can find it there. It does require a $30 filing fee. And this is a new requirement to ensure that organizations that we are funding through fiscal sponsorship are, one, nonprofit in nature, and then two, not applying as individuals using a fiscal sponsor or for-profit businesses using fiscal sponsors. So that's a new requirement. I do want to mention that I do not know how long it takes to get this status with the state. So I don't recommend waiting until the last minute. If you're using a fiscal sponsor to apply, please try to do that as soon as you can, because I do not know how long it takes to register. Okay, so I'll take you through a quick submittable tutorial with the image on the left. If you do not currently have a submittable account, you can go to this tab on our landing page to sign up and create a free account. But if you already have one, you will just sign in using your credentials on this tab. So I'll go ahead and do a new quick share of my screen. Okay, so when you go to our landing page here, you'll see the different grant offerings that we have available. We're talking about the Community Festivals grant this time. So you can look at the guidelines here. Please do read the guidelines before applying. You can click the link here. It'll take you directly to a PDF of those guidelines. And then once you've read those, you can click submit. and it'll ask you to look up an organization so you can tie your application to an organization. It's not necessary. You can click skip and continue to the application. So I'll go ahead and have us look at what the application looks like. Now, I do want to say, before you get to this spot, there will be some questions you have to answer in an eligibility check. And those questions are there to see if you are eligible for this grant category. So we'll answer some questions through the eligibility check. And then if you're eligible, you will get to this page. And this is where the application starts. If you are planning on having multiple people who have submittable accounts, keep that in mind, work on this application, you can click here and add collaborators. This top section will be some basic information. It's not scored by the panelists, so keep that in mind. This is some of this information is for further eligibility checking. A panelist will not have access to any of the contact information. You do need a City of Berkeley business license number to apply as well. So please also do that sooner than later because that can take some time. You don't necessarily have to have it in place before you apply, but you will need it. If you are awarded, you would need to get that business licensure. This is where you will put your organization, the applicant organization, so that even if you're fiscally sponsored, you're putting your total revenue here. And this is where you'll put your request amount up to $7,000. Okay, on the application, you will see the review criteria listed along with the percentage of your total score, and then detailed info about that particular review criteria. And all of the questions beneath here, beneath this review criteria, correspond to this set of criteria. Some of the questions, like this one, will have additional instructions for you. So please pay attention to that. And in places where you're entering text, you will also have your word count limits listed here. This is an example of a field where you would add a file. So you can drag and drop or choose from your computer file folders here. And almost all of the fields in the application are required. So it won't allow you to submit the application unless you've completed all the required fields. This is your budget form. It will auto calculate where you enter your numbers. For the revenue section, you have the option of writing projected or committed to every section of or every line item. For this section, this is where you would put your grant request amount. So whatever amount you're requesting, that will go here, and that is projected because you haven't been awarded yet. And then you'll have areas to put any notes about your budget here. So you'll get the sense that this is, a similar format throughout. You've got the review criteria here for your reference, and then the questions that correspond to that review criteria beneath them. At the bottom of your application, you can press Save Draft or Submit. This application will auto-save, as you can see right here, but I do recommend you pressing Save Draft often, just to make sure you're not losing any of your work. And then when you're ready to submit the application, you can click the Submit button. Before I move on, I do want to show you what it looks like for when you, let's say you save your application and you want to come back to it. It may take you to this, and if you have not submitted any applications before, it may be blank. But if you have something in draft, it will be under your draft folder. As you can see, I've got the Community Festivals grant here. I see the deadline is March 6th, not March 8th, March 6th at 11:59 p.m. And then you can click continue here. Now, if you are not the application owner, but you've been invited to collaborate on one, you'll find those applications here. But I do know some people get panicked if they don't see any of anything here when they've started a draft, but just keep in mind that will be under your drafts tab. All right. So once the deadline passes, staff will review all applications for eligibility and then assign those eligible applications to grant review panelists. And panelists will have several weeks to review the application using the review criteria and the scoring scale, and then we'll meet virtually over Zoom to discuss each application. All applicants will be notified about the status of their applications, and you'll get notified about when the date and time of the public grant review panel. And then once the review panel concludes, staff will review the scores and come up with funding scenarios. We generally have around $200,000 for awards in this grant category, but our final funding scenarios will depend on our budget and how many applications we have, and then our final scores. Those funding scenarios will be discussed at the grant subcommittee, and then we will take the final recommendations to the Civic Arts Commission for approval. All Civic Arts Commission meetings are open to the public, and you'll also be notified about the date and time of that meeting. And then soon after the commission approves the grant awards and we know for sure we're getting a certain budget from the city council, city staff will notify all applicants with acceptance and decline letters. And these are the 4 review criteria that panelists will use to evaluate your application. These are included in the guidelines and the application, and I highly recommend becoming very familiar with them. They're going to help you in how you want to frame your application answers. Each of the review criteria are weighted, so you'll see that they will be worth less or more of your total score based on the percentage. And the review criteria are festival narrative and community significance, festival management and production, community engagement and impact, and cultural equity. And this is the scoring scale that panelists will use in conjunction with the review criteria. So they'll assign a numerical value to each review criteria using this rubric. Again, with the weighted scores, the final scores will be averaged between all panelists who review your application. So for example, each review criteria will get a numerical value assigned, and then it will spit out your score from each review panelist based on those weights. Okay, some grant writing tips. Specificity is key. Do not assume the folks reviewing your panel will know about your work or your artistic discipline or any specific venues you're planning on using. This goes along with that specificity. So panelists are from all over the Bay Area and come from different backgrounds. So please keep that in mind when you are writing your answers. I also highly recommend you starting your application early. You could start it today if you haven't already. The applications are open. If you want to go in there and take a look at what the application looks like, you can. I also recommend having someone else review your application answers. This could be to look for clarity or just look for typos. But another set of eyes on the application is really beneficial. There are some description fields connected with the work samples that you will upload, and you'll want to use these not only to describe the work you've uploaded, but also let panelists know if there's any particular area of the work sample you want them to pay close attention to. So let's say you're uploading a 30-minute video and you want them to specifically look at minutes 15 through 16. Panelists will be instructed to not spend more than 10 minutes looking at all of your work samples. So if you upload a 30-minute video, it is very unlikely that they would watch the whole video. So telling them where to pay attention or keeping your work samples on the shorter side would be beneficial. And then I do not recommend waiting until the last minute to submit your application. We cannot accommodate for any hardware, software, or internet issues you may be having on the day of the deadline, and no extensions will be given. There is an 8.5-week application period, so please definitely use that time wisely. And there are several ways to access help with your application. First and foremost, please read the guidelines. You'll likely find answers to your questions in that document, but you can also check out the frequently asked questions on our website. That document is there to help you out. You can email me or call me or schedule a 15-minute appointment for an audio or video call over Zoom. And you can do this using a link on our website. I believe it's in the guidelines as well. So that link is in a couple places if you want to schedule some time to talk to me individually. And please note that although I can answer any questions you have about your application, I can't read or review your application for you. So you can't say, hey, can you read my application and then give me some feedback, but I can answer questions for you. And we don't have sample applications available for you to review either. If you do need technical assistance specifically with your submittable account, you've forgotten your password, you are having trouble accessing something on your account, you will need to contact Submittable's customer support directly, because I don't have access to help you with those things on your account. So the link is there. It's also in our guidelines. It's in a couple of places. The image on the left is what it looks like if you wanted to schedule a time to talk. And that could be over Zoom, or it could be a phone call if you want to schedule a phone call. This is the tool that you'll use to schedule that. And this concludes the presentation portion of the webinar. My contact information is on the left. And again, all of our resources available to help you apply for this funding opportunity are available on our website. And that's also where you can find the link to apply. Okay, so thanks for joining our presentation portion. I'll go ahead and start answering questions.